after my diagnosis, I went to the theater. And then after the theater, I went home to my dorm in London and did what I think anybody else would do at this point in this day and age. I Googled diabetes and got a lot of hits and started tearing through what I found online, going through videos and images, and found myself on the American Diabetes Association website. Now, that was a terrible idea. I basically tore through that website, learning everything I possibly could, and flipped myself out and ended up crying and hysterical, believing that I was going to be a blind amputee on dialysis by the time I even got back to the States. And I don't remember much from that night, but I do remember freaking out, and I believe I talked to my dad, and he was able to like talk me off the cliff and kind of calm me back down. And after that, like a day later, I had a huge care package from my father, and like any care package, it contained, you know, an encouraging note, but it also contained tons of books written by diabetics or nurses and doctors who specialize in diabetes, so that I would stop Googling this thing and flipping myself out with all the scary, scary photos that there are online and the information that's out there. So, oh, the other thing that was in this care package was like 2 boxes of sugar-free chocolate. And in my emotional state, I tore through one of those boxes of chocolate. And if you've ever had sugar-free candy in large quantities, you know that's a terrible idea. I don't recommend it at all. You end up with the runs, and it's quite awful. So, sugar-free chocolate is not your friend. Just eat the real stuff. Anyways, so now the best book that was in that box was written by these 2 women, and I actually don't have it because I lent it out to a friend, and I'm going to post what it was in the comment area because I'm not exactly sure, and it was a great resource, and one written by someone who was living with diabetes and nurses. You know, it put things into perspective and in the kind of way you needed to hear, not like the I Googled it and you're going to be a blind, legless dialysis person. So, anyways, but I thought I would show you some of the massive literature collection that I have amassed over the years, and I believe this one actually came in the box. So, John Hopkins' Guide to Diabetes. Let's see. Prevention Magazine about diabetes and taking charge. Then you've got the American Dietetic Association, Eating Right for Diabetics. That's fun. Then I actually have 2 copies of this. The Glucose Revolution. This thing's about the glycemic index, which I talked about a little bit yesterday. Or no, I talked about it 2 days ago. There's controversy over that and whether it's useful for diabetics, but that was interesting. Then there was Diet for New America because, well, people say that I should just eat what everybody else should eat, so that book's about that. Then you have things like the pH Miracle and the pH Miracle for Diabetes. So my dad, when I got home, wanted to cure me, and he believed that this was going to do it. So I ended up having to drink lots of smoothies containing kale, and kale is horrible. I don't like kale. You may like kale, but I definitely don't, and I learned it very quickly. So then there are things like these, the little tiny pamphlets from like Better Homes and Gardens. And a lot of people give me this stuff, and it's really sweet. I think somebody gave me this one, Everything Diabetes Cookbook, you know, so I can cook all sorts of things. This one I love because it's diabetic cooking from Barnes & Noble's. But the funniest thing is it's got cake on the front. I love that. And then I also have things like nutrient timing for peak performance because, well, as somebody who's active, learning stuff like this and how it affects diabetes is super important so that I don't crash when trying to be active. Anyways, so I'm showing you all that because yesterday at lunch, my dad gave me another book, and it's called Think Like a Pancreas. So it looks good. There's all sorts of graphs inside, and I'm going to try and read it in the next like week or so, because there may be some stuff in here that's useful. But I wanted to bring this up because I tore through all this literature upon being diagnosed, and the result was that when I got home a month and a half after diagnosis, and I started looking for a doctor and went out, I would get lots of questions from the doctors asking me about this and about that and stuff. And basically they would say, oh, so you've been diabetic for like years, because I could parrot back the answers from the book. I mean, I had amassed this knowledge of diabetes and this knowledge of how to care for it, and I had absolutely no understanding. So despite being able to talk about, you know, the grace period and the calculations that you needed for different insulin for different foods and all of that stuff that somehow I completely understood thanks to all these books, I had no understanding of why I was doing what I was doing, how it would affect my body, and that's part of the most important part. And it took a long time to convince my doctors that I had been diabetic for not even months, for like a month and a half, and pulling information out of them, getting them to treat me like a new patient and give me that kind of personal information was hard, but was what I really needed. Because as much as you can Google something, a condition like this, and learn all about it and pick up different books about it, which are great and give you a lot of knowledge, there was nothing compared to talking to doctors and nurses and people living with diabetes and people who were families or friends, family members or friends of people living with this disease, because that's how I knew that I could do it. The words on the page didn't convey that, but the people did. So I'm really grateful for the fact that I have that kind of network now. Alright, so I'm going to go read this book, and I'll let you know if I find anything good in it. I'm sure I will. Alright, cheers.